Test 1, 2.
My name is Lois Pines. I'm an adjunct lecturer here at the Kennedy School, and I'm teaching public interest advocacy. I asked Dr. Wigand to join us today at our class, and he also agreed to come here to the forum so that the university would have an opportunity to hear his very compelling story. During the 25 years that I've been in elective office in Massachusetts and in the public arena, one of my most important battles has been the battle against big tobacco. So needless to say, I've forced my students to spend several weeks on a case study involving the battle against big tobacco. We all love heroes. We admire courage and the willingness to stand up to giants. We hearken back to the tale of David and Goliath with admiration and awe. Yet few of us ever become public heroes, either by lack of opportunity or for fear of the consequences. Those of us in government think about this question a good deal. All too often, we decide that the risk is just not worth the consequences. Jeffrey Wigand was different. A scientist who worked in the healthcare industry for over 20 years in top-ranking posts, became chief scientist at Brown and Williamson in 1989. He went there to develop a safer cigarette. But he soon realized that his scientific work was being undermined by Brown and Williamson lawyers. Encountering corporate malfeasance, he decided to take on big tobacco. He decided to risk the consequences to make a difference in the lives of others. The father of 2 young daughters, he risked imprisonment, faced staggering legal bills, and endured personal and psychological as well as financial assaults. He lost his job, he lost his house, he lost his wife and his career. Dr. Wigand stood alone, and he has proven that one man or woman can make a difference. Before Dr. Wigand speaks, we have a very short clip from the movie based on his battle against big tobacco. Could we have the lights?
You go public and 30 million people hear what you gotta say. Nothing, I mean nothing, will ever be the same again.
Now, the work we did here is confidential, not for public scrutiny, any more than our one's family matters. We're very serious about protecting our interests.
He's got something to say, he wants to say it, I want it on 60 Minutes.
Maybe for the audience, it's just voyeurism, something to do on a Sunday night, and maybe it won't change a thing. And people like myself and my family are left hung out to dry, used up, alone.
What does this guy have to say
Now, don't be paranoid, Jed.
that threatens these people?
That isn't cigarettes are bad for you.
Who is this?
They have no right to hide behind a corporate agreement. He can talk, we can air it.
The worst kind of an organized smear campaign against a whistleblower.
Shoplifting, failing to pay child support.
They can paint everything with that brush.
What are you going to do now? You're going to finesse me, lawyer me some more? Try Mr. Wallace.
If we aired this segment,
I was told, don't talk. Mind my own business.
we could be a grave risk.
We're doing this with or without you, Lowell.
Are you a businessman or are you a newsman? He's only the key witness in the biggest public health reform issue in U.S. history. Does he go on television and tell the truth? Yes. Is it newsworthy? Yes. Are we gonna air it? Of course not. Why? Because he's not telling the truth? No, because he is telling the truth. And the more truth he tells, the worse it gets.
You manipulated me into this.
I fought for you, and I still fight.
The American public need to know.
Jeffrey!
And you wish you hadn't come forward?
Dr. Wagland's deposition will be part of this record.
You wish you hadn't blown the whistle?
Do I think it's worth it?
I told the truth. It's valid and true and
To these
provable.
people, that's not the point whether you tell the truth or not.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure being here. Lois, thank you for your comments. I have to be very frank up front and say that I don't vision myself as a hero nor a martyr. I mean, I would not be here, quite frankly, without the support of lots and lots of different people. Some of them lawyers, but most of all, 153 children that were in my classroom while I was teaching high school at DuPont Manual High School in Louisville, Kentucky, and a principal who stood by me during the gravest assaults. And to those, I owe the gratitude, and they are truly the heroes. Why would scientists join the tobacco industry, and what was to be gained? What happened? What changed? What experiences in this tobacco industry led one to pause for thought? What happened in the aftermath? And then what is the fabric of today's posture and environment relative to tobacco? And what is it trying to do in terms of dealing with its tarnished image? And has the leopard really changed its spots? And will the tobacco industry now take to heart truly public health and safety and overcome 50 years of corporate malfeasance, deceit, and disregard for public health and safety? I joined the tobacco industry in 1989. I'd spent 20 years in the healthcare industry in senior management positions with companies like Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and Merck. I joined after 6 months of extensive interviews with not only Brown & Williamson, the nation's third largest tobacco company, and part of BAT Industry, the world's second largest tobacco concern, explicitly with the understanding to use my scientific talents, science for the search for truth, and things that I had been steeped in the healthcare industry to make a safer cigarette. I joined Brown & Williamson in Louisville, Kentucky in January of 1989. I was fired in March of 1993. I will take you through some of the experiences in the company, and these are not meant to be derogatory to the company. It's people or products. It's the plain factual truth. I never experienced, at least in my 25 years working in the healthcare, lawyers telling me or scientists how to think and interpret science, with the intention of using science to generate controversy and doubt rather than science being in the search for truth. I never saw in my 25 years lawyers change documents, such as during the normal discovery process and litigation, documents that were controversial or fortified or changed the duplicity that the company had. That is, we're in the nicotine delivery business. If we hook them young, we hook them for life. Nicotine's our product, and tar is the negative baggage. And I'm going to relate one such event. I'm going to relate two, and I'm going to let you draw your own conclusions. I attended a meeting of all the scientists of BAT in October of 1989 in British Columbia. The intent was to sit down and develop the policies and strategies, how to make a safer cigarette. Biological safety being one type of safe cigarette. How to make a fire-safe cigarette, a cigarette that didn't cause fires when exposed to flammable material, bedding, and furniture. How to deal with the issue of environmental tobacco smoke or secondhand smoke. How to deal with the issues of using genetic technology to manipulate nicotine in the plant. How do you measure and assess biological risk reduction in terms of assessing the quality of tar? And what would be the test you need to do to ascertain if you've done such in reducing the safe or increasing the safety? I must tell you, there's no such thing as a safe cigarette. Right? Are there degrees of safety? Yes. And I firmly believe that people, as adults who choose to make a competent decision, should be allowed to smoke. However, I disagree vehemently that this should be targeted to children. In fact, what the industry does is it makes its profits for the grist for the mill out of the 3,000 kids a day that it gets, which generate the 430,000 lives that are lost each year. 85% of those who smoke started well before the age of 18. The top 3 brands that are advertised are the top 3 brands that are smoked by children. We sat down for 4.5 days and we discussed how to deal with these issues. At the end of it, it generated about an 18-page memorandum of what we had done and the actions that we expected to happen. I must tell you that when I circulated that memorandum back in the corporate office to the president and chief executive officer, it created a state of apoplexy. I can't characterize it any other way. To talk about addictiveness of nicotine, to talk about using molecular modeling or contemporary techniques in the pharmaceutical industry to change the addictiveness of nicotine, to deal with environmental tobacco smoke, to deal with a safer cigarette. How would you reduce the biological risk? You have to also tell you that the industry had for 50 years told the American public that there is no relationship between smoking and health. Nicotine's not addictive, it's there for taste. We don't target kids, et cetera, et cetera. And they've also been very successful in all the legal forums that they went to, particularly in product litigation. They had won out because during the discovery process, there was no way of establishing the links between what the company thought inside versus what it said outside. And so when this document was circulated, it said nicotine was addictive, and it was the consensus of the scientists, and we need to change it. We could use genetic technology to change nicotine's metabolism in the plant. We could truly make a safer cigarette. The senior managers, my bosses, ordered a lawyer who did not attend the meeting to change the minutes of the meeting so that those minutes would never be discovered in a court of law. And he took 18 pages of minutes and reduced it to 2.5 pages of vanilla. The other copies of the document that was circulated around the company were destroyed, collected, and the permanent record became the 2.5 pages of minutes. Those would be the discoverable documents in any form of litigation. And I must tell you also, at that time, I didn't know what to do. I had transitioned from the healthcare industry. I was making $300,000 a year. I had a wife, I had 2 young children, a car, a mortgage, and I also started to learn how the industry treated defectors, and I didn't want any part of it. The next thing that happened is now this would never happen again. So the scientists and lawyers were all summoned to New York, and a policy of how to handle scientific communications was passed on. Lawyers would be in every form in terms of scientific effort, reading the documents beforehand, sequestering documents, keeping documents overseas so they couldn't be discovered, caution and writing seminars conducted by lawyers for the scientists, controversial topics never reaching us. I was getting documents now at my home by fax so I could read them, documents that would never become resident in the United States. Meetings of the senior executives were no longer kept on Brown and Williamson property. They were kept at a remote location in which the chairman and CEO and COO would go to that site to read documents. Why? They couldn't be discoverable or produced in litigation. And I must tell you, I was very uncomfortable because I had never seen nor participated in that kind of effort in any of my corporate experience. Whether it was illegal, I didn't know, but it definitely, to me, was unethical. And it now started a policy going forward that all these documents now would be controlled by a lawyer to prevent controversial topics being in the document retention process. Well, I turned my head and looked the other way, focusing on additives, smoking and health issues, addiction, and whatnot. I also started having a difficult time explaining to my 2 daughters, who were the benefit of my affluence in private schools, why I was working for a tobacco company and why the job I was doing was killing people. Well, things went on till August of 1992. August of 1992, I received a copy of a document from the National Toxicology Program, which is our governmental research program that evaluates additives, chemicals, in terms of their toxicological effect on human beings. And this compound that the NTP evaluated was a chemical compound called coumarin, not coumadin, coumarin. Coumarin is a sweetener. It's an additive that's added to cigarettes that allows, or pipe tobacco, that allows some amelioration of the acridity or the acidity of the tobacco and the irritation. By the way, there are 499 additives used in tobacco products. Some to manipulate nicotine in the form of nicotine, some of it to ameliorate and allow for the inhalation, whether it be menthol, cocoa butter, licorice, cocoa, etc. All made to a product that we believe, or the industry has nurtured, to be a natural product, grown in the ground, wrapped in paper, and smoked. Far from it. It's a meticulously engineered and designed product coupled with cowboys and camels. Well, in the 1980s, the industry had used coumarin in its cigarette products. And coumarin had been removed from their cigarette products because it became controversial. Controversial because it had been shown to be hepatotoxic in dogs and shown to mask foul odors. And so they had removed it from the cigarette products. Brown and Williamson continued to use it in its pipe tobacco. When this report came through, I urged the president of the company to remove it immediately because it would be the appropriate level of duty of care for an additive to be shown not only once before to be controversial, but also now additional information showed that it was a lung-specific carcinogen in laboratory mice and rats. And I was told to go back to the lab, find a substitute, because they weren't taking it out because it would affect sales and profits. And I would say that was about the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Several months later, Mr. Sandifer became Chief Executive Officer, and I was fired. Probably something I should have done before, but I didn't do it. And in March of 1993, all I wanted to do is get away from this. I made a 4-year and 3-month mistake. Well, that wasn't to be, because I couldn't find a lawyer in the state of Kentucky who would represent me in litigation against Brown and Williamson. By the way, I should tell you, Kentucky's #1 product, cash product, happens to be tobacco. And so I negotiated with Brown and Williamson my severance agreement that is enough pay to carry me through to find a new job, something I never had trouble before, and continue my health care benefits. And health care benefits were fairly important to me, for I had a daughter that had a spina bifida. And so I needed health care benefits. So I negotiated my agreement in June, finally. And all I wanted to do is forget it and go on. In September of 1993, I am sued by Brown & Williamson for allegedly violating my confidentiality agreement. I told another employee of the company what my salary was. And they sued me for breach of that confidentiality agreement. And by the way, confidentiality agreements, are standard order of business in corporate world. You sign a confidentiality agreement so you don't take proprietary trade secrets from one company to another company. Because if I worked for Coke and I went to Pepsi, I would take the secret to Coke. This way, they were afraid I was going to divulge the secrets to Cool and Viceroy. Not hardly. Well, in order for me to get my salary and my health care benefits uninterrupted, I could do that by signing a new confidentiality agreement. One by any standard in the tobacco industry, any other industry, was the most onerous, draconian agreement one could ever sign. It required that before I would talk about tobacco, or anything relative to tobacco, I had to tell the company. I had to tell them who asked me about it and what I was going to say. And I think you all know what I did. I signed it. And my health care benefits, my salary was reinstated and uninterrupted. Again, all I wanted to do is get the hell out of Dodge. I made a big mistake, and it was getting bigger and bigger. Well, now enters CBS and a producer called Lowell Bergman. Lowell Bergman approached me in January of 1994 because he'd received some documents over the transom. It means he had 2,300 pages of documents from Philip Morris. They dealt with the ability of Philip Morris to develop a fire-safe cigarette. That is a cigarette that would not ignite flammable material. There were between 1,200 to 1,500 lives lost each year at fires directly related to cigarettes. Lowell wanted these documents interpreted from a scientific perspective, so I did it. I was paid $12,600 to do it, because I didn't believe anybody could stop me from making a living and using my scientific knowledge. They didn't ask me any questions about B&W. I would not give them any answers. We made that agreement. Well, as I read these documents, I got very uncomfortable because Philip Morris was able to develop a fire-safe cigarette. They tested it in 1985-86, a cigarette that would reduce the loss of lives associated with fires. They called it Hamlet, to burn or not to burn. And they chose not to bring forth the technology or these efforts because there was no legislation that forced them to do it. And this is one of the Senator Joe Moakley's business, the Moakley Bill, Moakley Law, fire-safe cigarettes. Well, I didn't know what to do with it. I knew now. And I was getting increasingly uncomfortable. Well, I'm going to take you quickly through some more time, and then I'm going to get to try to bring some of this back in closure without giving you all the details and try to compress 10 years into about an hour or a half hour. Well, early 1994, I hope you all remember that the Congress was looking into investigating the tobacco industry. And under Henry Waxman, they were starting to ask questions relative to how the industry behaved and what was going on in terms of nicotine's addictiveness, targeting of children, the health risk associated with tobacco, and they were having the congressional hearings. Well, shortly before that, David Kessler, a pediatrician by training and also head of the FDA, asserted that nicotine was addictive and the FDA had jurisdiction over it and was starting an investigation. It was truly a pediatric disease. Well, I'm starting to get contacted now regularly by the staffers in Congress, whether it be Senator Wyden's staff, or Joe Moakley's staff, or Henry Waxman's staff. And guess what I have to do? I have to report what I do. So they call me, and I reported it to the company, as my agreement told me to do. Well, in April 1994, somebody places 2 telephone death threats to me, directed not at me, but at my 2 children. That if I mess with tobacco, my children would be at risk. Investigated by the FBI, they couldn't find out the source of who did them. They could tell you where they came from. They put a trap and trace on my phone for 6 months to find out who was making these threats. I got to tell you that in April of 1994, the 7 CEOs got up in front of Congress, and they all raised their right hand. And they swore that nicotine wasn't addictive. They swore there was no relationship between smoking and health. In fact, smoking was no bad or no worse than gummy bears and Twinkies. Their words, not mine. And I must tell you, as that indelible image replayed itself in my mind, I realized that by my silence and my use of knowledge, that I was just as guilty as those on my screen. And so in May of 1994, when David Kessler of the FDA contacted me and asked if I could help the FDA, I agreed to help the FDA navigate through the science, the tobacco chemistry, the documents, nicotine manipulation, additives, genetic modification, etc. And I have to tell you, it's something right out of James Bond novel. I traveled under assumed names, I went through unmarked entrances, and my code name to the commissioner of the FDA was research. For the FDA also realized that now their investigation posed a serious threat to the industry, and the industry doing much of anything to derail that investigation. As you may know, the FDA ultimately produced a jurisdictional document that went to a court. It was upheld part and half, that they had jurisdiction over nicotine but could not control the marketing. That's been appealed in an appeals court, reversed it, and now it's being heard by the US Supreme Court whether the FDA has jurisdiction over nicotine or not. Should hear sometime this year. I need to move on real quick here. I'm getting no time. Well, 1995 rolls around, and I now see not only some documents that are called the Merrill-Williams documents from inside the company that were purloined by a paralegal, which confirm everything that I saw, lawyer involvement, hiding of science. And then on August 5th of 1995, I decided to go public with CBS 60 Minutes. On August 5th, I taped an interview with my family and basically took them through how I believe Mr. Sanford lied to Congress, how they manipulated nicotine, how they targeted children, et cetera, et cetera. I had several caveats, though. A, they couldn't air it until I got a lawyer, because I needed a lawyer. I hadn't had one yet, and I knew I was going to need one. 2, is they would provide some sort of physical security for my family, particularly my children, and I had control over the timing. Well, what happened next becomes the subject of the movie, and the subject of what I believe is probably not the best or greatest time for those in the media. CBS caved under pressure from what's called a principle called tortious interference. That is, they induced me to violate my confidentiality agreement, therefore they could be sued by the tobacco industry, in particular Brown & Williamson, for $10 billion plus. Second, I must tell you that CBS was in the process of being acquired by Westinghouse. I should also tell you that CBS was owned by Lawrence Tisch, but also Lawrence Tisch was the owner of Lorillard Tobacco. And one other further thing to make things a little bit more dicey, they were in the process of negotiating with my ex-company, Brown & Williamson, for a $100 million exchange of products. CBS canceled the airing of the original 60 Minutes interview in October of 1995, but not until somebody within CBS leaked the complete transcript of the August 5th interview to the New York press. I was immediately sued in Kentucky ex parte for theft of trade secrets, violation of my confidentiality agreement, and a TRO was placed on me in terms of speaking about tobacco, an injunction against my free speech. I want to give you one other part of 1995 because I think it's also germane, and then I'm going to move real quick. Well, 1995, November rolls around now. I have a lawyer, by the way, from a sleepy town in Mississippi called Pascagoula called Dickie Scruggs. Dickie had not only the financial assets, but the intellectual assets to represent me, and he agreed to represent me pro bono. Also, the U.S. Department of Justice was getting very much interested in fire-safe cigarettes. Also, Mississippi had filed the first lawsuit against the tobacco industry to recover the costs associated with sick smokers and the expenditures within the state. I was subpoenaed to appear in November in Mississippi, not only by the government, but also by the state of Mississippi. I left school, I traveled down to Mississippi, and I must tell you, the first night was not very comfortable. They had to screen Dick Scruggs home because I was staying there with the Attorney General of Mississippi for wire bugs. Already a number of the plaintiffs' attorneys suing the tobacco industry had received death threats, bomb threats, and had to have physical security. Also at the same time, the property was patrolled by armed state police. Not very comfortable. Well, next morning was fine. The deposition went fine with the government on fire-safe cigarettes. And during that deposition, Brown and Williamson had gone to the Mississippi Supreme Court and tried to quash the deposition in the afternoon in a civil matter. They did not succeed. They succeeded only in getting it sealed. But they also went to the Kentucky court, who was going to hold me in contempt of violation of the restraining order. And holding that in contempt meant that I would go back to, if I went back to Kentucky, if I testified, I would most likely be incarcerated. And I didn't really want that. Dickie, Ron Motley, Attorney General Moore told me this over lunch. And they told me that either way, I could either go forward or not go forward, but they would stick by me. Well, I gave the deposition. I went back to Kentucky. I did not go to jail. Compliments to the Attorney General of Mississippi and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Well, January rolls by. Things are really getting fun. January, the sealed deposition from Mississippi reaches the Wall Street Journal. The same deposition, same testimony or same statements I gave to CBS in August the 5th, and now under oath in Mississippi, now appear on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and are loaded up on the internet. Wow. Interesting. And they were threatened also. Also at the same time, Brown and Williamson amassed a 500-page dossier characterizing my misbehavior and my deceit. The Louisville papers published it in content. The Wall Street Journal took it and debugged it and published it also on the front page saying it was a smear campaign directed at discrediting me in public opinion. Also in January 1996, somebody, while having two armed ex-Secret Service agents protecting 24/7, somebody managed to put a death threat in my mailbox along with a bullet, reminding me that they knew where my pretty children were. So January did not start out well. During 1996, I gave 11 days of deposition in Louisville when I was supposed to give 2. Compliments of the Kentucky system. 96 ended up fine. We moved into 97. I'm going to take it real quick to June of 1997, when the 39 attorney generals had come to an agreement with the tobacco company of settling for $368 billion, which would have given also the industry given the FDA full jurisdiction over the industry, as well as giving up some marketing and advertising rights. The last stumbling block was dropping the lawsuit against me. And Brown and Williamson wanted to continue the process of humiliation and intimidation and refused to drop the lawsuit. That was until the 39 Attorney General said, if you don't drop the lawsuit, we walk out on the deal. And ultimately, they dropped the lawsuit on June 20th of 1997. And I've been free to speak my piece since then. What's going on today? Well, first of all, let me answer the right. Would I do it again? Most certainly. Has it been worth it? Most certainly. What is going on today in the texture, the fabric of the tobacco industry? And has the leopard really changed its spots? How would I mean by that? Is the tobacco industry now taking deep concern over the public health and safety of our children and its smokers? I want to take you back to 1954 when the tobacco industry executives all got together and issued what's called the Frank Statement, that they would undertake all research directed in terms of making a product safer, not putting a smoker or a user at more risk, and work in conjunction with the healthcare groups that were working towards public health and safety. They formed the TIRC, ultimately became the Council for Tobacco Control. Never once did any research that linked tobacco smoking and health risks. Today they're saying we can make a fire-safe cigarette. New York Times, January 2000. November of 1999. Nicotine's addictive, by the way. Smoking does kill you, but we're going to be more responsible now. We're going to admit it. By the way, we're going to feed more hungry. We're going to give to the arts. We're going to help battered women. But it's going to give us license to continue to kill 200,000 people a year. Now I ask you, what do you think is motivating this industry now to become socially and corporately responsible? And I will tell you, it's not public health and safety issues, nor is it a targeting of 3,000 kids a day. It's about the greed that they've had and demonstrated for 50 years. It's the issue of their stock going from $58 a share down to $18 a share. It's financially driven. It's an issue of money. And if you think this leopard has changed its spots because it's going to feed a couple of people and cover it over a Kraft cheese slice, you're sorely mistaken. What I would suggest, and what I'm going to ask you to do, is as part of what we settled out in November of 1999 was a $206 billion settlement by the industry for past malfeasance. Part of that goes to Massachusetts. And what the industry is doing is saying, we can take care of your children, we'll take care of that. Don't spend any of that money. Put that money into roads and bridges. And I urge you all to make sure that that money goes back into the spirit of what the settlement is about, and the 430,000 people that die each year for 50 years, and make sure it doesn't happen again to 3,000 kids a day that they need to keep the business going. I also should tell you that the industry fought vociferously to keep their documents, which were discovered during the litigation, from being discovered. They fought it all the way up to the Supreme Courts of the various states. And in one case, Minnesota, the documents now are led to RICO action by the U.S. Department of Justice. RICO meaning reserved for racketeering and corruption, generally for gangsters. 2, smuggling charges. They know if they keep the price down low, consumption goes up. Smuggling charges, not only in this state, for RJR and Brown and Williamson, but now also in Canada. Price fixing. All have come out of their own documents within their own company that were forced out through discovery, which clearly characterize and clearly chronicle constant, conscious misbehavior directed at purveying a product that, when used as intended, kills. I'm going to stop here and take questions. I'm sorry I moved so quickly.
Thank you very much. It is hard to take 10 years of someone's life and reduce it to 20 minutes. And we went a little over. Are there any questions?
Sure, please.
There are 4 mics. Right there?
I'm sure there's a
And
fine...
up top on the second floor?
Okay. My quick question would have just been, as you were mentioning before, you had done some work in the healthcare industry, and then you took the job with Brown & Williamson, and you characterized it as a 4-year mistake. The question being, at what degree, or at what stage of the game did you realize that, this is a highly litigated business that the tobacco industry was, that you were likely, your whatever, if you want to say it's your morals would be compromised at some point? Why did it happen 4 years down the road, maybe not like in the first year or 2 years, or was it sort of a build-up that it just became more and more intolerable as sort of a crack point? I'm not sure if it would have been that much a surprise that in a highly litigated business.
I've tried to figure out when I should have done it. When would you have done it?
Well, I wasn't. If only I was there, I'd tell you.
You're hypothesizing for me. I didn't know when to do it. All I knew is after a year, I knew I made a mistake. I had a family. I had a mortgage. I had all those, and I wasn't willing to put that all at risk at that time. Was it more that was going to make it put me over the hurdle? Probably. Did I take the $300,000 and continue working there? Yeah, I did. If I'm guilty of doing something wrong, then I've done that wrong. But I ultimately felt that my moral compass was best served when the buildup kept on coming. There was no epiphany. An epiphany, seeing them getting up in front of Congress, listening to and watching the documents flow out, not being able to see documents that I wanted to see when I was the head of research there that now come out through a third party. That's what basically turned me.
Gentleman on the upper level?
Hi, thank you. That was an incredibly frustrating story that you tell, and you tell it incredibly well as well. I can't wait to see the movie now. Now, the fact, though, that cigarettes are bad for you really isn't news to anybody. And if you, for example, in Canada, the packages of cigarettes are even clearer than they are in the United States, that cigarettes kill you. Nevertheless, people still buy cigarettes. People buy cigarettes in this country as well. And so my question for you is, what do you recommend the tobacco companies do? Given that we all know that tobacco is bad for you and that cigarettes kill, should they just shut down their operations, or what should they do?
Well, I think the first thing they ought to do is allow adults who choose to smoke the ability to make a competent decision. That is not continue to tell people that nicotine is not addictive, not to continue to tell people there is no risk associated with smoking and health, something they haven't done until recently, and I'm not quite sure in November 1999 they really said that. I think, can they make a safer cigarette? Most certainly can. Can they make a fire-safe cigarette? Certainly can. Can they reduce the additives that help create the addiction and maintain the addiction? Yes. They can change it. And I asked what they should do is accept FDA regulation. Instead of having a covert pharmaceutical business, let's have it out front. Accept FDA regulation without the caveats. Quit targeting 3,000 kids a day because they know 85% of today's smokers come from 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and 13-year-olds, not from 25-year-olds who are making a personal choice. That's what I want them to do.
I'd like to ask a question about imagine you are appointed the head of the FDA in the incoming administration, just for a moment.
Don't want it. Don't want it.
Could you tell us a little bit about your science background and who you would bring to the table? Because one of the things I find interesting about your story is that there's also a controversy about genetically engineered foods. And there's a lack of labeling of what goes into a cornflake if somebody decided to make cornflakes addictive. I'm curious about what you've seen and what you think is missing and what advice you would give.
From the tobacco industry or from foods?
From protecting children from substances that addict them to a habit that leads to their health being destroyed over a period of years. If you had free reign as FDA head, what would you do?
Well, I think clearly tobacco products ought to be regulated. They are the most unregulated product that we have today. If you turn over any product that you consume, can you find out the additives in it? Can you understand what the level of risk that you have? The industry has created doubt. The industry has created controversy with the science that they had when they could have used the science to set the record straight. They could have done it in 1954. They could have done it when this first Surgeon General's report came out, 64. They chose not to do it when they had the science in hand that said nicotine was addictive. They had the science in hand that said and knew that tobacco tar created disease. They should have dealt something with something. What to do today? I think the industry ought to be regulated. Regulated in terms of disclosing what's in the package. Do you notice plutonium-210 in tobacco? Do you notice arsenic, cadmium, lead, pesticide residues, plus 499 other additives? Disclose the additives. Disclose what's in the product. Label the product correctly. The current FTC method is understated by numbers because the FTC method is a method by which we assess delivery, tar, nicotine, carbon monoxide. The method is co-opted by the industry today. And what it does is some people think they get 10 milligrams of tar and 1 milligram of nicotine. In reality, they're getting double to 3 times that amount. Create the methodology that allows those who choose to use a product the right information to make a good, intelligent choice. The industry has not fostered intelligent decision making. They have preyed on the behavior of people when they're young, the insecurities of young. They make women think they can stay thin by having a cigarette instead of a chocolate. They advertise now to battered women saying, we're going to help battered women. Yet their own documents say we have to go after women because they're neurotic. They're good candidates for smoking. Read the documents. I think the FDA should control it. I'm not so sure that the government or the Supreme Court is going to give them that authority. I think it's going to be bounced back to Congress. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. If I was to do it, I would regulate it, just as David Kessler tried to do. He didn't have the support after it started going forward. It truly is the only product that I know that is as unregulated as it is. And they have done it for years. So it needs to be regulated.
Do you have any comments about how it's different than
Can we
other
go to
products?
another question? Yes, sir.
Yes, you started your comments by saying that you were not a hero, but, sir, if you are not a hero, I don't know who is. My question is this. It is certainly commendable to think that adults should be allowed to make decisions about what products they'll use, but we've seen that as public education has increased, the hardest core smokers are the poor, uneducated, and the mentally ill. Do you believe that this industry can be trusted to market a product taking into account and treating people as mature adults?
No. Sorry, simple answer. I mean, I urge you not to believe a word I say. Go to the documents, and when the executives of the tobacco companies were asked why they chose not to smoke, they don't smoke this crap. It's for the dumb, the black, the ignorant, and the young. That's their comment. If you read through their documents, they gear to the disadvantages. They target African Americans. They target Hispanics. They prey on young girls who think that they can stay thin by having a cigarette. They glorify a process that leads to death. Should they be trusted? No, I don't think they should be trusted. They should be regulated. But I don't believe it should be outlawed.
Gentleman in the corner.
Yes, Dr. Wigan, yours is an impressive story. However, my father has been an employee of Philip Morris for about 27 years now. And my question flows from the fact that, like my family, the tobacco industry has meant a lot for Southern families and the Southern economy in general. So what I'm concerned about is what I feel is a missing element in this regulatory and public relations equation, and that is the fact that tobacco is perhaps the principal employer in the Southern economy. And when we use homilies, or when we speak of the tobacco industry in terms of homilies, big tobacco, do you feel that we're being fair, or do you feel that we are actually confronting the issue truthfully?
Are you talking about the tobacco farmers, or are you talking about how Philip Morris has deceived the public, or Brown & Williams for the industry?
Well, do
you believe that the industry...
The nugget of my question is, what do you believe is the impact of the tobacco litigation, of the public relations campaign against tobacco, on very real families that depend on the tobacco industry for sources of employment?
Well, I think times have to change. I mean, clearly tobacco kills 430,000 people a year. That has to change. And if that means the farmer has to change, so be it. The farmer needs to have other alternative ways of dealing with things. And we ought to help them. That's part of what the settlement funds are. Should the industry change the way it does its practices? Most certainly, yes. They have lied and distorted the truth for 50 years. And the only way the truth has come out is because they were sued into it. Not because they volunteered the information, not because they felt corporate responsibility. They were sued into it. And that's the way they came forward with the truth. Not because they wanted the truth to be known about their product and their intentions and how it's marketed.
Gentlemen.
So, I'm someone who's, as Lois knows, has been very active in tobacco control for many years. Head Sweden with the Tobacco Control Resource Center. I want to thank both Lois Pines for all her years of work on this issue, and you, of course, for the courage you showed and continue to do so. Point I would just make is to underscore, I think, maybe the most important thing you're relaying to us and comes through from the movie is to, when you look at the tobacco industry, you have to look at what they do and not what they say and not what they put out in PR. And I think one little good example of that is just to look at what Brown & Williamson has done regarding you just since The Insider came out and was nominated for Best Picture, and we'll find out next week. But even just the trashing of you since from that point, late last year until now, really shows the true nature of this industry. And I would just underscore what you just said about urging people, students, anyone else, just read the documents, contrast and compare, and you see, obviously, night and day, 180 degrees apart. And this industry just continues on, both in this country and around the world, acting the way they do, corporate malfeasance, as you described it.
Well, thank you. I would also tell you what we stop here clearly is going to go to other third world countries. And the industry has already said in their own documents that things are going to get tough here in the United States and Canada. We got to go find some other third world developing countries like Africa and South America and Far East. And they've already started that. So we have a worldwide epidemic. We don't just have a U.S., North American epidemic. And it needs to be addressed.
Gentlemen.
You talk about the problem of smoking in third world countries and in other countries. You have some experience in Japan. I believe you speak Japanese. The Japanese experience with tobacco does not jibe well with what you are saying. 1960, 80% of Japanese men smoked. Right now, Japan has the highest per capita consumption of cigarettes in the industrialized world. Since 1960, the percentage of Japanese men who smoke is down to 60%, still well over twice what that is in the United States. They've been smoking a lot for many decades. They have the highest life expectancy, lowest death rate from heart disease, and one of the lowest rates of lung cancer in the industrialized world. Now, how does that jibe with what you're saying as far as the export of tobacco products and the harm that it's going to do?
Well, first of all, Japan Tobacco manufactures products in Japan. Second of all, Japanese products have activated charcoal in them. Okay.
Cigarettes in Japan?
Huh?
They have unfiltered cigarettes in Japan.
Yeah, they also have, but they don't, 80% of them don't smoke unfiltered cigarettes. Most of them smoke mild 7s and 7 lights.
Maintaining that the Japanese cigarette is better than the American cigarette?
I think in some ways, yes. But no cigarette is good for anybody.
Then why does Japan have the highest average life expectancy in the industrialized world?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'll look at it.
Having seen the movie, much was made of CBS's involvement in your case. And I'm curious to know what your opinion is of the media and how they've handled tobacco, the whole issue of regulation, and your situation in particular.
Well, clearly some of the things that went on in CBS are very disappointing. CBS was truly intimidated by the tobacco industry for telling the truth. And they truly have not fared well as that mistake. I would say that in the whole scheme of things, and I'm looking back and what the fabric of today is, I don't go back and say, wow, CBS was bad. It's a reminder, though, to us that a large corporation can intimidate another large corporation. And in this case, it happens to be freedom of speech and the press. And this is something that I think we ought to keep aware of. And the movie highlights it. I mean, this movie is not about smoking and health and tobacco issue. It's about how a large corporation, in this case tobacco, intimidates another large corporation, particularly in this case CBS. And there's many other militating and mitigating factors in this that made for the CBS decision. I also should remind you, though, that several months before CBS cavitated, ABC did the same thing. They apologized to Philip Morris in a $10 billion lawsuit over day one and nicotine being spiked. And they apologized to Philip Morris, saying they had made a mistake in terms of the choice of words. Spike, they should have used the word manipulate, but still, cigarettes manipulate are addictive. They apologized as part of the Disney buying ABC. So, I mean, I should have given you that fact before. So there's lots that has gone on with this, folks. It's just not a simple thing of ABC or Philip Morris intimidating ABC, but you also now see Brown and Williamson intimidating CBS. And again, over what the truth of the product is, only for a year later or 2 years later to admit it.
Gentlemen?
Yes, I'd like to ask you about the movie. I'm sure a number of us here have seen the movie, and it must be quite amazing to have a movie made about your life. And what I'd like to ask is, did you like the movie? Did they talk to you often during the making of the movie? When it came out, were there parts of it that were shocking? Was it a fair portrayal? And what part did you not like the most?
Which one do you want me to answer first? First of all, I had very limited to do with the movie. I mean, other than spending a day with Russell Crowe on a golf course and with a dinner. I was also restrained from participating in the movie because the restraining order was still, in fact, in place when they were developing and writing the screen. Is the movie accurate? Yeah, I think the movie is accurate in terms of, does the tobacco industry intimidate the media into retracting on its position on dealing with the truth? Yes. Are there multiple people in those lives? There's Lowell Bergman, who fought the battle in CBS to get the program aired. There was the Attorney General of Mississippi that was sued by his own governor for filing a lawsuit. There were the attorneys that were intimidated daily in terms of going against big tobacco. So there are many stories within the movie. I think the movie does deal emotionally, philosophically, and psychologically with a period of 2.5 years compressed into 2 hours and 30 minutes. There are parts of it that are dramatic license. Okay? You know, I'll give you, for example, did the bullet in the mailbox happen? You bet your ass it did. That's fact. Was I followed to a golf course driving range by a big burly guy? No. Was I followed every day by an ex-FBI agent hired by Brown and Williamson to know exactly where I am and what I do? Yes. Fact. Name, I can give it to you. Was my domestic relations attorney's office broken into in Louisville, Kentucky the day after I retained him, and my files and his files strewn all over his room, left with matches around? Fact. Who did it? We don't know. Was the lawyer representing me in Washington, D.C.'s car broken into, and the only things taken out of our car were my files relating to the litigation with Brown and Williamson, while other valuables were in the car? Fact. Who did it? We don't know. Did a Brown and Williamson attorney take my briefcase from the concierge's office in Louisville, Kentucky during those 11.5 days of deposition and disappear with it? Fact. Yes. Does that scene in the golf course capture that menacing, empty feeling? I think it does, but I look at it with a different set of eyes. I'll let you be the judge.
Yes, I was wondering, right now, are there any pressures that bear on you that keep you from speaking your mind? How well do you have to rehearse answers to questions with lawyers or anything like that? Do you have to be careful of any libel suits, anything like that? I made my disclaimer in the beginning that I will not make derogatory comments about B&W, its products, or people. I have not rehearsed one statement. Or one answer, because I didn't know what they were unless you were going to send them in to me beforehand.
which I would have liked anyway. Other issues still, yeah. I am still followed. I am still intimidated or tried to be intimidated by the media with Brown and Williamson doing things before places I go to and appear. By continuing the smear campaign and half-truths, still going. Was I physically or verbally assaulted in New London, Connecticut in September 3rd when I was getting an honorary degree at Connecticut College with David Kessler? Yeah. Are those part of the life now? Yeah. Am I going to change what I'm doing now? No. But that comes with the territory. I'm not going to be intimidated and not going to be humiliated anymore.
Yes, ma'am. Hello, thank you for speaking today. David Kessler spoke here last year, and he mentioned that Philip Morris had made a significant contribution to Harvard University. And I was wondering if you could comment on, be it Harvard University or a shelter for battered women, what your thoughts are about the recipients and what organizations should think about when considering those funds.
Wow. Clearly, Philip Morris is now using their humanitarian efforts to help battered women. True. They're giving to the arts. They're giving water to the thirsty, food to the hungry, etc. I would ask you to very carefully look at the ads that they're running on TV in terms of battered women and ask if they are not inducements into smoking. Look at them carefully. And I will say that when I look at them, my perception is it's a form of advertising, particularly to a group that is very much at risk for risky behavior. So I would say that I don't believe what they're doing is out of true respect for human life. I think part of what they're doing is trying to cover up the tarnished image they have, because 68% of their dollars come not from Kraft cheese and Miller beer, it comes from tobacco, folks. So let's keep the facts straight. Their business is out of tobacco, and this tobacco has killed people for years, and they could have changed that years ago. And I don't care how many battered women they help or how many they feed, they need to deal with the 200,000 people a year that their products are directly responsible for killing. Do something about that. And do the other stuff, by the way. Don't use it to gloss over.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering if there are any possibilities of forming a company that would, or any research into a safer cigarette, non-flammable cigarette, any way that government could sponsor this, the United Nations?
Okay, first of all, Philip Morris developed and tested a fire-safe cigarette in 1985-86, number one. Number two, in January, they announced in the Wall Street Journal that they're test marketing that cigarette now. So they have the excellent technology and need to share it for the benefit of everybody. Safer cigarette, I should tell you that the company that fired me is working on what now? A safer cigarette. They have gone and talked to the people at the Institute of Medicine and the National Academy of Science, and now how do we do a safer cigarette? Well, they know how to do it 10, 15, 20 years ago. Take out the nitrosamines, take out the benzopyrenes, reduce the number of additives, don't cheat on the ventilation, don't cheat on the cigarette design. Simple. I mean, I'll give you more list. But today, can they do it? Yes. The issue is, if I have a safer cigarette, is everything else now that I've been telling you that it's safe, unsafe? That's the issue. Should they do it? Yes. Can they do it? Yes.
And one quick follow-up. If you take a step back and look at your experiences here in the corporate environment, and we read about the price fixing with Hoffman LaRoche and ADM and Rome Palanque that happened, and they get a slap on the wrist. I mean, what have you taken away from your experiences overall in the corporate setting?
I think there are. I worked for the pharmaceutical industry, which I think you refer, and must tell you, I thought I was doing the right thing there. I was making a difference by producing products and science that at least help people with better quality of life or save lives. What I saw in the tobacco industry, at least the company I work for, and I can't talk about all the other documents I've seen, I saw egregious acts of deception, intentional deception, when they had the opportunity in the 1950s and in the 60s to say what they knew. Why prolong the lie? And the lie was trying, up to the last case in Minnesota, was trying to be squelched. How? By preventing documents that supported what people believed they did from ever coming public. And as these documents now are being looked at by more and more people, there are 8 million pages. They continue to find more and more specific actual overt cases of misbehavior, whether it be smuggling or price fixing or targeting or whatever. Do you think they need to study the brain waves of an 11-year-old kid to understand 5 years later what the effect of smoking is? Do you really think they need to do that? For what purpose? Is there a purpose behind that other than trying to understand how adolescents smoke and what the effect does? So these are things that are coming out, and I urge you all, or really, don't believe a damn word I say. Go read them and fill it yourself and get involved. You can get it on my website, jeffreywygan.com. It will take you to every other website. It'll take you to the CDC website. It'll take you to the government websites. It'll take you to Tobacco Free Kids website. It'll take you to Minnesota Select. Look at them. It will give you a rude awakening.
We have one last question.
I just wanted to ask what we can all do about this. I mean, you've taken this incredible stand. Now, I mean, there's lots of us here who are journalists, who are planning to go into politics, into lobbying. How can we best work against these special interests, which are so powerful?
Well, first of all, get involved. So, I mean, you have an opportunity in the state of Massachusetts to make sure that part of your settlement, billions of dollars over 25 years, gets reapportioned to preventing this in the future. 2 is don't get duped. Keep the public awareness out that when you think about settlement with the industry, doesn't mean it's over with. In fact, the battle is just beginning. And to keep them accountable. They haven't been accountable. And they're only being accountable now because there's a price to it. It's an economic price, stock for one. And they need to reinvent the image. Not because they care. And I think you people who are forming policies and politics and can get involved can influence that and keep it going. And really make a better future for your children's children. Because this is what this is about. It's not about us. It's not about the adults that choose to do risky behavior. It's about the kids that don't know what they're doing at 11 years old. And that's their market. And they won't stop at that. And if they don't get it in Boston, they're going to get it in Bangladesh.
The director of the Institute of Politics, the inimitable Alan Simpson, former United States Senator, is with us this evening. And Senator Simpson, would you like to close?
I would just say it's been a very provocative thing, especially for those of us who were in the Senate and the House when Henry was starting to turn the crank, and they all came. I remember that day. Oh yes, glorious thing. And, so you're wonderful to expose yourself, to put yourself on the line, and that's what I try to tell these fine young people. Take part or get taken apart. Thank you.
One person can make a difference. Thank you very much.
That's your water to take you to the flame.
Thank you,
Thank you. That was nice, wasn't it?